We didn't record the introduction during the workshop yesterday, so I'm going to re-record it now in the cold light of day. Shall I begin by mentioning the state of the world? Does anyone need me to remind us of profound crises in social and environmental relations, combined with fracturing democratic institutions and international emergence of demagogic authoritarian leaderships? Whether we speak of it or not, it is difficult to imagine an account of the present that doesn't include widespread feelings of despair, helplessness, and anger. Not that such feelings are new for all of us. What has changed is their endemic character. This is the context in which we meet to consider the value and state of our society. What is it about the group analytic society that was founded 70 years ago by Fuchs, Elias, Abercrombie, Demare, and others? What is it that continues to evoke a sense of loyalty and commitment in its members? We may hope to learn something about that during this workshop. Some may be very clear about what is this group analysis that provides the medium for our mutual engagement. Others may contribute uncertainty about the nature of group analysis, its place in the world and their place within it. We need both. Uncertainty is a precious asset. What is the significance of an anniversary, a 70th anniversary in particular? When GAS was founded, I was 1 year old. Just over a year ago, I had my own 70th birthday. So I am 1 year older than GASi. There are still plenty of us for whom it is true that we are older than the society, but before too long, GASi will be older than all of us. No previous birthday has been as unsettling to me as my 70th. There is a psalm which I confess I have not been in the habit of reading, but which has somehow wormed its way into my mind, which says, "The days of our years are 80 years and 10. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away." 80 years and 10, the biblical allowance of 70 years for a life. I have entered a new phase in my development in which death has acquired a more powerful sense of imminence and immediacy. The process has been accompanied by a familiar feeling of blindness for not having more fully confronted personal mortality much earlier. But how does mortality operate in the lives of organizations? How old is an old society? And how does an organization renew its vitality as it grows older? Is it significant that pretty soon GASi will be older than all of its members? When I was still new to the presidency, I was approached by a member who wanted to persuade me to take a particular course of action. The approach took the form of, "You'd better do what I suggest, or many members will leave and everything will fall apart." Not quite explicit was the message, "GASi will die and it will be on your watch." This was the first but not the last such approach, and it left me with a heightened sense that the primary task of the management committee is to secure survival. From a certain point of view and at certain moments, survival overrides purpose. Survival is always there in the background as an influence, coming to the fore when the books threaten not to balance or when internal conflicts acquire particular intensity. However, the way that the theme of survival plays out in our society is influenced by fundamental insights in group analytic thinking about the relationship between individual and group. We have avoided resorting to purging and splitting as instruments of survival, in contrast to other similar organizations' histories. We may sometimes lack certain professional and technical management expertise, but the deep understanding of group life that is borne by the membership contributes to maintaining the integrity of the society. The crucial relationship determining the ability to survive is that between the old and the young. how they regard and relate to each other. As GASi turns 70, intergenerational relations acquire even greater importance. I joined GAS London in the early 90s, entering the group analytic world after completing a training that was striving for recognition and accreditation. I found the atmosphere at the Heidelberg Symposium warm and inclusive. I had a sense of acquiring a home, and for me this was associated with the then president, Brian Boswood, who I remember with warmth and respect. Brian wore the presidency lightly and approached the task of relinquishing it, handing it on to another with grace and generosity. At the AGM that year, the proposal to change the name of the society was first discussed, to drop London and replace it with international. To the surprise of many, this was opposed by many of the non-British members who argued for keeping the link with the society's origins. 20 years later, in 2013, when Brian was living in retirement in the West Country, he let it be known that he was dying. He also communicated that he did not wish to be isolated in his last months. He wanted contact. Although I wasn't a personal friend, I took him at his word, and one afternoon I called him, something I wouldn't think of doing in such circumstances today without an appointment. Janet, Brian's wife, took the call, and a few minutes later, Brian came on the line. He seemed to warmly welcome my call, and the conversation that followed has stayed with me, touching on Brian's feelings about his impending demise and his awareness of what this meant for others, as well as for himself. We spoke about the loneliness that the dying can face arising out of our fears. In generational relations between the older and the younger, many feelings come into play, some of them difficult to acknowledge. We may know about Oedipus and Laius, but facing the painful dynamics of succession often defeats us and leads to failures of understanding. The young can feel that the old are clinging on to power, while the old imagine that they are desperately seeking ways to pass it on. But what is the it that has to be passed? Anniversaries mark the fact of survival and a consolidation of achievements arising out of that survival. As the workshop title suggests, they are moments for looking back and looking forward. Looking back, seeking to make sense of what has gone before, is a project fraught with difficulty. The pursuit of historical origins, the sources of the present, may be no less a task than the attempt to understand the cosmic beginnings of the universe. It's particularly complicated in an era when the truth of events is routinely denied and inverted, sometimes before the event has even occurred. Mistruths are established as fact through brutal repetition. All around us, repetition replaces thought and argument, creating a fortification against doubt. At the same time, repetition is at the heart of loyalty and love. It's a strategy for defending against awareness of inevitable loss. Anniversaries satisfy our impulse to repeat. Repetition creates the impression of permanence and security. One of the principal tasks of the Society's Management Committee is to maintain the repeating elements in the calendar. These provide the ritual architecture which we all inhabit. That architecture, with its rhymes and repetitions, allows us to proceed with the conviction that we know what purposes we share. Whilst that belief is sometimes vital, it is also important to acknowledge that we do not fully understand what holds us together as a group. The vital link with the past is through ongoing transgenerational dialogue, sustained by our awareness that in times of violence, war, and systemic crisis, survival depends on sustaining groups that are capable both of cohesion and coherence, where thinking remains possible in the face of despair. This is not blind optimism, but engagement with painful necessity. Group analysis, which 70 years ago moved those founders of our society, gives us tools and the conviction to fight to maintain spaces for the survival of such work. Thanks a lot.